Hello and welcome to FPL Have a Beer, where I invite you to have a beer with me while I chat FPL. The time recording, the channel is at just over 900 subscribers, and it is my dream to get the channel up to 1,000 subscribers by the start of next season. And if you could help me get there by smashing that subscribe button, it would really mean the world to me. Thank you so much if you do this. And also, please check out channel memberships by pressing the join button if you'd like to support the channel even further. So welcome to another interview in the Meet the FPL Manager / Meet the Content Creator series, where I ask a lovely member of the FPL community on to chat about their experiences of content creation, their thoughts on FPL and mental health, and we have a general chat about FPL towards the end. So if you're a regular viewer of this interview series, you'll have heard me say at the end of the last interview that came out with FPL D Unit that would probably be the last interview coming out this season. And the reason I said probably is I was hoping to get a very special guest on this week for a very special interview to end the interview series with for the season. And with that, I'm pleased to be joined by a man who, alongside Mark Southerns, who came on the interview series a few months ago, created the Scoutcast, and with it the first ever FPL podcast, I believe, which set the template for so much of the FPL content we see today. Lee, aka Granville. Lee, thanks for joining. How you doing, mate?
Thanks for the invite. I'm doing great, thanks.
Yeah, yes. Mark gave me well, he didn't give me your number. He sort of after we finished his interview, he said like, "I'll try and get Granville to come on." That was a few months ago now, and then it's been a little bit of arranging since then. But I'm
It was when he said, "Do you want to do this interview?" I watched his, and then I thought, yeah, go on then.
Nice.
See how that goes. But I'm out of practice, so I'm out of practice sitting in front of the camera and chatting about football. So
yeah,
it's very welcome.
You were saying before we started, you just put on your Man United shirt from the Scout days as well.
Yeah, well, I think it's from before my Scout days. I think this goes back to the 90s. I took it out of the wardrobe, give it a little sniff. Yeah, and it shrunk. Yeah, magically it shrunk in the wardrobe. You know, like how your clothes do. Yes. It's funny that, isn't it?
Yeah, all my clothes have been shrinking for about the last 10 years.
Yeah. So yeah, it's one of my favourite tops actually. It's got a kind of toweling feel to it, which is strange. It's not like like the current tops are all kind of aerated, but this is you definitely sweat buckets in this.
When's that from?
It's not really for a modern footballer.
What year is that from? Is that the early 90s?
Oh god, somebody will probably tell you that, but it's sometime in the 90s.
Sometime in the 90s.
Maybe late 90s.
So I'm also very pleased. A little joke I've put in here as well, but with yourself coming on today, Lee, I'm going to probably go between calling you Lee and Granville throughout the interview. We've now managed to get every member. I'm going to call it the extended Scoutcast crew. I've had Joe, Mark, and Let's Talk FPL Andy on. So I'm thinking it's like completing a card collection of FPL content creators for the interview series. So very excited about that.
Well, that was the hardest one to get then. So
of course, you are the crowning jewel on the cards. I can say that now I've had the other guys on. I don't have to worry about what they think.
Yeah.
So what I usually do, Lee, is start off by asking you a few general things like where did you grow up? Who do you support? What are your first memories of football? Things like that.
I grew up in Manchester. I grew up in North Manchester. Lived there till I moved down south in 1999. United supporter, of course. Where that started, it started at the 1976 Cup final. Right. I'm actually a bit older than I look, which United lost to Southampton. And I remember my old man came back from work and he had a couple of posters, bizarrely. He gave us a couple of posters of the team just before the game. And so that sort of got me into supporting United. Devastated after the game. I mean, I didn't know that much about football, but I knew what losing was all about.
What was United's team like in the 70s? Was that part of like the bad era? Before?
That was the Doherty team that came up from the in 1974.
Okay.
So it had a lot of younger players, and they were up and coming. So they got to the final, they came up, they went down in 73 and they were terrible. Actually, they were really bad. And they they came back up the next year and they built a decent team under Tommy Docherty and got promoted and then made the 76 Cup final, then made the 77 Cup final and played Liverpool and beat them in the final. And I remember watching that on black and white TV in my parents' room. And that's where I really got hooked on supporting United. Dad took me and my brothers to our first game at Old Trafford, which was sat in the Stretford End, and that was against Stockport County. It was a League Cup game, and that was in 1978. I would have been 9 probably, and I do remember that game because Frank Stapleton scored the first goal, and I missed it because I was that sort of in awe of the crowd behind me. I was just looking at other people.
Yeah.
I'd never been in an atmosphere like that. I think I was kind of brought up wrapped in cotton wool. But when I saw all these working class people and eating pies and everything, that was really important to check them out. So I just remember just missing that first goal. So that and they won that game 3-2. So that was my first live game. Everyone at my school was into football. They either supported United or City. It was just huge. And I got into football, and back then you didn't really, there was no real live football. You either went to the game or you watched the highlights of the match of the day. Or of course when the World Cup was on, where a lot of games were played live, were shown live on ITV and BBC. My first World Cup was actually in 1978, when England didn't actually make it to the finals,
Argentina.
A lot of the focus was on Scotland, if you remember.
I'm not that. Believe it or not, I wasn't even born then. It's not.
Yeah.
It's rare that I get people that are older than me, so it's nice to.
Yeah, and it's funny, these memories that you have of events which are not actually, they just sort of scar you a little bit. I remember a couple of things, like Scotland not getting past the first round, which is obviously disappointing. But then the second disappointment for me was seeing Argentina win the cup, and that was fine. But then I wanted to watch them lift the trophy. It was a big thing for me. I wanted to see them lift the trophy. But my gran sent me up because my gran was looking after me. I think it was my parents were out, and my gran was looking after us that evening, and she wouldn't let me stay up to watch the lifting of the cup. And I was sat at the top of the stairs trying to peek through to see the TV, to see him lifting the cup and crying. So that was that
not the best memory.
That was pretty heartbreaking. And it was my gran. And 1982 was a great World Cup as well. And I watched, that was 4 years later, I was kind of in my teens, and I used to sit watching the game and record them on my audio cassette. And I'd play that night I'd play the commentary in bed with the lights out and listen to it. Because that time you had like great commentators, Barry Davis and John Motson, particularly Barry Davis.
Yeah, I loved him.
I might even still have those tapes somewhere, in a box somewhere. I
used to do something similar, but I'd record myself commentating and then listen back to myself commentating. Was that what you meant?
Yeah, I'd done that kind of thing as well.
Yeah.
It's a difficult thing, commentating, actually. I do actually know a commentator who used to commentate in the 90s, and I remember chatting to him about it, telling him that I used to try and commentate my own games, and just, it was just awful. But there's a certain skill to commentating. Obviously.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so I started going to games at Old Trafford then, and as a kid, I was quite small, stood in the Stretford End. I think it was about 90p to stand in the Stretford paddock.
Wow, really?
And it was like, if you ever scored, it'd be a double-edged sword, because I'd get swept, because there was no, the terracing then was just kind of, it's just steps with crush barriers, and you'd be swept forward down, like 20 steps. And so it'd be, you'd celebrate at the same time as kind of, holding your head and trying to make sure that you didn't get injured. So it was quite dangerous, and that was before Hillsborough. But I do remember one time coming out of Goodison Park and getting crushed next to the at the entrance. It was they weren't great on health and safety, and so it was no surprise what happened at Hillsborough. It was just it was just dreadful. But those I mean those were great. Yeah, the halcyon days.
What's your best memory as a United sport? It would be the treble or the first Premier League?
The treble.
The
treble for different reasons. I mean, I didn't go to any of the games. I had already moved down to Brighton by then. In fact, actually, I moved on May 99 to Brighton, and United won the treble in May 99. So I watched all the games in pubs down here. I think winning the league after 26 years, so in 1993. So they'd gone 26 years, 26 barren years without winning the league, and Liverpool had won it so many times in between. But it felt sweeter because the year before United should have won it really, and they let it slip, and Leeds won it that year, and that was the last year of the Football League. So it's the first year that it was the first year that Premier League started, and United won that league that year, and that was probably I guess that's my fondest memory. Just go because I did go to the game that when they lifted the cup against Blackburn. They'd won it by virtue of Villa getting beat to Oldham I think on the day before, and so we knew that they'd won, and so that was kind of the celebration game. But that I would have thought was my highlight. There's lots of them though.
Yeah,
lots of them. When United were good.
Favorite player?
I'm sorry. Favorite player?
Yeah.
It's
difficult one for United.
I mean, I could say going back in time, like Stuart Pearson, who was striker.
I don't even
know that. Scored in the 1977 Cup final.
Don't even know who that
is. Steve Coppell, do you remember him?
Yeah, I remember Coppell, yeah.
Manager for Palace. Cantona, of course. Paul Scholes at United. But I've seen, it's not just United players. I've seen like lots of greats players. I've seen Maradona live, Zidane, Ronaldinho, Messi, Ronaldo, of course.
It's a great.
We're fortunate enough to see many of the greats as well.
Yeah, and unfortunately, also the players they've got playing for them now, I guess.
Yeah.
Do you reckon they'll get back on track next year, or? Say we're recording this before the Europa League finals. Yeah. That's this week, isn't it? Is it this week?
Well, if they win the Europa League, you might consider it actually a good season. But no, they've been absolutely. It's always the most important thing for fans is to win trophies, right? I mean, if you're not going to win the league, then what's the point in coming second or third?
Yeah.
It doesn't bother me that much. But the way that they've, when you look at the teams ahead of them, I mean, no disrespect to them, Brentford and Fulham and Wolves, they shouldn't really be finishing ahead of United. So I think they're going to have a long look at themselves. I do hope that the manager stays. That he does get the backing, because he hasn't had a transfer window yet, not a full one, and he's able to impose himself on the team. I know he has tried, but it doesn't appear to be working with the players they've got there at the minute. But I don't think. I mean, I have seen some pretty bad United sides, before, in the 80s. But I'm not sure quite as bad, as what I've seen this season.
So when did you get into fantasy football, Lee?
Well, pretty much when I met Mark at my workplace. So the way, because I did listen to his interview, and he does have some things a little bit mixed up. I mean, that's what happens when you get to our age.
So I remember for viewers, he said, if you correct me if I'm wrong, he said something like there was this guy called Granville that was top of the league, and everyone said he's the fantasy football expert. That's basically something like that when you started working with him, wasn't it?
No, that's not really the truth. I mean, he is right in saying that as I'm opinionated, of course. But no, what I remember is that when I met, because Mark was in my car share, Well, he needed a lift to work. He lived in Brighton and he needed a lift to work. It's not a car share. It's just me driving and him in his passenger seat. But actually, we shared with a few people, and because it's like a video games company, there's not great crossover with football. You don't find they're either into I think the vast majority of people aren't really into sport. And so when I met Mark, to find someone who was into football, I had someone I connected with.
Computer games people aren't really
Yeah,
into.
yeah.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, it's not common actually. I mean, I think it's there were obviously a bunch of us because we formed a league, but it wasn't overly popular in those circles. So when I was talking to Mark and we were talking football, and he said, "Do you play fancy football?" I says, "Nah, that's a stupid game, silly game." Um, and that was my attitude towards it. So I'd heard of it, but I hadn't really played it. And then we both joined the Telegraph game. So I think it was the beginning of the season. I just thought I'd just give it a shot. And after the first month, I was like in the top 10. And my name was printed in the paper.
Oh, really?
It's when they used to print out the leagues, and it was like top 10. I was like ninth, I think, and my name was in the paper, and I was like, "Wow, look at that!" I mean, it's early days. There's obviously a lot of luck around it, but look at that, and I'll go, "Yeah, God, you could win it." Anyway, it wasn't the case, and I fell away. But I think of the same year because I don't think FPL was big. I don't think it was the biggest fantasy football game when we first started.
So what sort of year would this be, mate?
2006.
Okay. So it would have been.
2006.
It would have existed, but just started FPL, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Well, there was like the Sun game where there was. So it was all based around prizes, and I think the reason why the FPL game wasn't so big is because the prizes were crap.
Yeah, that's not changed, is it?
Yeah, and I think it's still crap. I don't know. I haven't checked to see what the prizes are because I'm nowhere near ever winning it. But I'm sure they've improved slightly, but they're still not, what you'd expect.
I think it's a couple of Premier League tickets, I think, something like that.
So it hasn't changed.
Yeah, really. not really.
No, but it's not about the prize, is it? I mean, that's where they went right and other games went wrong because it wasn't about winning that top prize. I do remember in the Telegraph game, there was a number of people who had multiple teams and they were paying, they had like 50 teams that they paid for in order to find the team that would win it. And it just, in terms of numbers, it's kind of, rigging it really.
Yeah.
And so I didn't really like that aspect of it. And then when I saw the FPL game, I thought, well, that's, something I could get involved with. And Mark said, let's play that. And I think it was a year after we met. I can't remember, but it was it was definitely 2006 was definitely the first season I played FPL. And we had a work league, and we then built up a rivalry, myself and Mark. A really strong rivalry. And the reason Mark was so motivated is because in that first year, I actually won our mini league.
Right.
And he told me that he'd never been beaten by any of his mates. So he used to play with all his mates. And I think he got bored of it because he was just winning every single year. And I was the first one who challenged him. And I remember that season up until, so it was Ronaldo's sort of breakout season. He'd been with United the year before. And then the next year when he really started scoring goals, that was the season when I had him in my team and Mark didn't. And Mark was really, really stubborn. And it took because he wasn't a United fan. So I think during those years we didn't put, you couldn't put sort of loyalties aside. It was a, he probably had lots of Forest players. Forest weren't in the league that year, but I certainly had lots of United players. Anyway, I had Ronaldo, and he went on a scoring spree, and Mark was really stubborn. And I think he may have got him like in a February when he'd already done loads and loads of damage. So that year I won, and that was my first year playing FPL. And I think I was like 1,014th. But we never ever looked at the ranks, the overall ranks. It wasn't important. It wasn't important at all. I don't remember looking at my overall rank seriously until like my third season.
How many people played? Was it a couple of million at the start, or was it about that?
Sorry?
Was it like a couple of
The amount of
million?
players.
Yeah, different numbers.
Yeah, I think it was less. I
Yeah.
think it was less. Yeah. And yeah, so it was. Yeah, that would have been easier to get, to get a higher rank in those days. But also considering we were just using our own data and our own heads. We didn't have any
No.
resources. That's where it was sort of a pure game, and you weren't. You were just using your own, your own nous for your team. So that was that's what I enjoyed doing. And the first few years, it was we had a really good rivalry, because I know that he definitely beat me in the second year, and I think the third year, and then I think I made it 2-2 in the fourth year. And so there was a sort of like, we were always kind of, him winning it one year and me winning it the next. But then he started getting really, really good, and he started becoming, because he was quite analytical, Mark, and he started using stats and everything to help him out, and that wasn't really my bag. And so that's when he started, because he'd already started the website,
Yeah.
like a couple of years in. His I remember the time when I was giving him a lift, and he said to me, "I'm thinking of starting a website giving fantasy football tips."
I think he's.
And my response to that was, "Nobody's going to listen to you. You don't know nothing." And it was just that.
Didn't he say he set up?
Bit of
Didn't he say he set up the site one Christmas or something? It was something
Yeah,
like that.
I think it was around Christmas, yeah. But I was, initially I thought, really? You think that's going to work? But as time went on and he started developing it, because he then started building the website, I thought, that actually might work. And I remember him showing me his first stab at it, and then and showed me the forum, and then there were a couple of people on the forum commenting. I thought, great, that's really good. How can I help you? So then it was just kind of, we worked together on a lot of things and sort of developed ideas. I mean, he had loads and loads of ideas, sort of like the ticker, which I think he came up with very, very early, and the watch list.
So you had
Those things he got
before
early.
we get onto the scat cost, you did have quite a bit of involvement with the general site before that came about, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, as he was building the site, he put it on. It was on shared servers, and they weren't particularly stable. And as he was getting more and more traffic, the servers couldn't handle them. And I just, I was kind of his. I helped him with some of the tech. Sometimes when he was away and he needed, because you'd have to reset the server often.
What is it? Server
from
just like a box
from the back end. No. The server was off-site, but you'd just have a web page where you could restart it.
Okay.
So there were a couple of times when things weren't going well with the site, and I had to help him out. But it was, and then I started actually posting on the site, and then and getting really, really involved on the forums, because you've seen the way the forums are built is with the scrolling pages. That's how it started out. I mean, it still lives on to this day. And we were always chatting about creating a traditional forum where you've got threads and you can click on them, like you see everywhere else, like not Reddit, but any of the kind of proper forums. That kind of setup was traditional, but that was the only way really of doing it with WordPress. So he just kept it like that, and actually I think it worked. And we started, when it came to match day, it started getting really busy on the pages, and we created we started using a chat tool on match day, so that people could chat live on the page. And that didn't work out too well. I mean, it became too busy. You had comments just scrolling really, really quickly. And then you started getting smart artists coming on and trolling and being rude and calling us all names under the sun.
Some things never
so then we
change.
had to start moderating, and at the same time we had to then start adding moderators to the website as well. So it's it kind of evolved to what it is now. I mean, it's amazing to think back where it all started.
So
because we didn't really anticipate it getting as big as it has done.
No. So to move on sort of to where most people will know you from, which is obviously be the Scoutcast. Where did the idea for that come about? Like how did that come about? For best of your recollection.
My recollection, I don't know if it was Mark's same recollection. It was my idea. I said, you know how we're talking now, we could just talk on, as we're talking in the car about football and having a bit of banter between us. We could do that on a recording. So I could set that up on. There was a couple of pieces of software that allowed you to do it. I think the first, that's right. So that was one time on the way to it, and we were chatting about it for ages before we did the pilot. I mean, it was like a good 2 or 3 months before we actually got together and recorded that first pilot. So we kind of got together. So we had a studios at work, sound studios, and they let us use them to record the podcasts. The first one I do remember, I was quite nervous. Hadn't done anything like that before, and I prepared, I prepared some some dad jokes, which I thought were funny at the time, but when I delivered them, they sounded bloody awful. I happen to listen to that pilot episode maybe about 5 or 6 years ago.
Are they
Mark sent it. I found it.
Are they still available? All the old ones.
Well, Mark has them all. I've got loads that are still available, but not the first one. So we do have them archived. But it was pretty rough. Mark found that. So do you remember the tune? The opening title tune. So anyway, Mark got that he was given permission to use it, and then I think he used that in the pilot, or at least in the first episode. He used that, and then we just started developing it from there. But the idea came in my car on the way to work one day.
So you're the official. What's the word? I'm trying to think. When there's an invention and someone like trademarks it or whatever. I'm trying to remember what you call it.
Well, I didn't invent the podcast, but I think I don't. I'm taking. I might actually be taking more credit than it be, because I just can't remember I can't remember Mark's input into that, to be perfectly honest with you. But it was it was definitely something that I pushed. I think I've done a lot of pushing with Mark, because I think when we were recording, we could tell we needed to improve the tech and the microphones, and I pushed him to get better tech and to have a better setup. But all the time he was pushing himself. He's because he was writing all the articles and spending so much time doing all that. It was sometimes difficult getting time from him to do the podcast, because he'd be so involved in writing the articles, which were it's the bread and butter of the site, really, more than the podcast. So the podcast, sometimes we didn't do them every week because often Mark wasn't available. And then as years went on, I became less available. But initially it was I think I was driving it, but Mark was doing a lot of the legwork outside of the podcast. But actually, to be fair, in preparation for the podcast, he would write the notes and I would do the editing primarily, because it was he just wanted, because we weren't recording it live. We wanted it, pristine. So we'd kind of removed little bits and shortened it. and added in all the all the sound effects and whistles and tunes. So yeah, that was. It's remarkable how long it takes to actually actually edit it. You'd spend 3/4 of an hour recording it, and then about 3 hours editing it.
Yeah, I've heard people say. I know one guy, FPL Nightmare. You may not know him. He's a good friend of the channel. He has been until recently. He was 20-minute video, and it'd be like an hour to record it, and then he spent like 6 hours editing it. But he was adding in like graphics and all that sort of stuff. So I'm just going to say, for normal viewers of the interview series, I've kind of ripped out the normal content creation questions here, and I've just got a load of questions I'm going to ask Granville about the Scoutcast. So, what were those early experiences like, and when did you decide? Because obviously, I call like the original extended member of the Scoutcast, yourself, Mark, Joe, Az, and Andy, although they weren't on it all the time. What were the early experiences like, and when did you decide to get other people sort of involved?
We may not know this, but actually, Andy and John T weren't the first guests on the podcast.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we had the first guest we had on the podcast was a contributor called Acres. His name was Richard Idale. He's not around anymore. He's certainly not around in fantasy football circles, as far as I'm aware. And he was the first one we had on. He was a good lad. We met him because Mark used to. I think he mentioned that we used to have scout camps. So we used to have where we all met up in London. And so I met him there, and I thought, well, it'd be a good guy to have on. And then we had Andy, his name's Andy Goddard, and he's Andy52 on Twitter. He's still involved in fantasy football, but he doesn't really show up on Twitter much. And so he was the second person on. But I'm not sure they particularly enjoyed our the way that we conducted ourselves, because we had a thing going between me and Mark where we just make fun out of each other and a real rivalry.
They didn't enjoy the banter.
Yeah. And so we knew each other and we could make fun out of each other. But they didn't really. It wasn't really for them, and they didn't really have the relationship that we had. And actually, even with Andy and John, when Andy and Jonty came on, it was a little bit more serious. It wasn't that kind of. It was the whole kind of theme of the podcast changed. But no. So yeah, so it kind of just evolved. Like, we wanted to get guests on, and then I think Mark did one. He did an interview with somebody, a forest man. I can't recall his name. And so we just started introducing people just to mix it up a little bit. But there was always us, and then we go back to the two of us doing podcasts. But I can't recall the date, the year that we first started doing the video podcasts. I think it's probably 2014, 2015, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's about the time I started watching.
Yeah. So I was, I actually was quite reluctant to go to video, only that it sort of just changed. It changed a lot of things, because you watch it, you're watching people, and it becomes something slightly different. And so initially I was against moving to video, but you move with the times, and I think and I think it did work when we moved to video as well.
I guess
and we were building up quite a following. We had on the podcast, we were kind of like 20,000 people listening to it.
Wow.
And then when I think fewer people were doing YouTube, because YouTube wasn't quite where it's at now. Not so many people watched it, but or had the capability of watching it, of course, because so it kind of built up. But we did have a lot of people listening to us in those old days, and the greatest thing is when somebody recognizes you, on the street, not from your face, because you haven't even been on video, but just from your voice.
I find that so strange.
Incredible.
Yeah.
We went to So I think our first scout camp that we had was at the Haymarket. There's a sports bar at the bottom of the Haymarket, and there was a few of us there, not many. It was a handful of us there, and we went to watch the final game of the season. It was and United and Chelsea were fighting for the league, and myself and Mark were fighting for our own league. And Mark was something. There was something like 8 points between us coming to the final day, and we had. So we knew that was happening. So we set all this up, and he had. So the way it panned out is that he had Didier Drogba, and I had Frank Lampard.
Oh,
and it was a game when it was a final game of the season when
Aston Villa, was it?
They played Wigan.
Oh,
Chelsea played Wigan, and they beat them 8-0.
Yeah.
And Lampard scored a penalty in the first half, and we were level pegging at that point. And second half, Drogba scored, and Mark was slightly ahead. And then Chelsea got another penalty, and I'm going, yes, come on, got another penalty, come on, Lamps. The next thing is he hands the ball to Didier Drogba.
Was the golden boot on the line or something?
No, sorry?
Was the golden boot on the line? So I do remember the game.
It may have been. I don't know, but because he may have been in the golden boot. I can't recall, but I was absolutely furious, and it cost me that year. It cost me the fantasy league. So anyway, the reason why I mention it is because the other reason I mention it is because we were spotted. Like two guys came up to us to say, "You Mark and Granville," and we went, "Yeah." He says, "Oh yeah, we know you from your podcast." I says, "How did you know we were here? How do you recognise us?" He says, "I just got somebody mentioned it on the boards that there was going to be this little get together at the Haymarket, so we came down."
Oh wow!
So that was the first time that first time that I was aware that people were, there was a lot of people out there who knew us and were listening in. So obviously now it's a lot, with all the meetups that they have and fest and stuff like that, it's very different. But you never really had contact actually with anybody else except the people who are in your mini league, people at work, and people in your own, in your own surroundings. We never really met up with anybody else. So that's yeah.
I was going to ask. So when you obviously had Let's Talk FPL Andy, who's gone on to be probably the biggest FPL content creator. Obviously, as is big with Black Box and Joseph. I mean, when you were doing it earlier on, did you expect, particularly Andy, to go on to such big things in the content creation FPL world? No.
And I met Andy a couple of times in London when he was working for the Fantasy Football Scout. No, it's a complete surprise when he said, "I'm going off to do my own thing." But what a job he did! I think it's he took it to another. It's obviously a different type of show and everything, but he took it to a different level, a different direction. And he's fantastic. Yeah, and it's fantastic. But good on him. He gave up his job, I think, to do that, to start that. So I tune in sometimes to have a listen to what he's got to say. But and he's very fast rolling. I think he's a perfect person for that. I'm not sure I could do that kind of stream.
Yeah,
not for me.
The other thing I was thinking about, another thing I was thinking about was when you guys started. I think there was you, and then the Always Cheating podcast started shortly afterwards. I just thought I'd give a shout out to them because I don't know if they're ending.
I do, yeah.
Yeah, so if those lads want to come on at any point, please reach out. But did you imagine at the time, particularly early on when you were making the Scoutcast, the FPL content would become so big? We've got hundreds, if not thousands, of videos and podcasts out there now.
I thought it'd be, I knew it was going to grow. I knew the game was going to grow. But you can't. I didn't anticipate anything like it's become, because it's become very professionalized. I think it kind of started, when Scout started, going to a membership model, and then it sort of changed direction. And I think I think what's happened to it is amazing. But there was in America, the NFL has always had like fantasy leagues, and that kind of grew into something a lot bigger, with lots of websites, lots of content. So if you kind of look over the Atlantic, you often see, what's going to happen to us in a few years' time, and I think that's what happened. As it happens, Mark was contacted by a couple of guys from NFL. They'd created a website and sold it for a lot of money, and they wanted to invest in Fantasy Football Scout, and they contacted us. I remember having a phone chat with them about taking it to the next level, and they were really really confident that it could be as big as NFL in the US. And I was kind of skeptical about it, but I think they were right.
The soccer fantasy is going to be huge. Huge, I tell you.
Yeah. So I guess there were signs there that it was going to grow into something a lot bigger.
Yeah.
But I couldn't have envisaged this. But of course, things like YouTube wasn't, that's grown into something else as well. It's just all kind of social media and everything is not, it's a lot bigger than what it was. So we used to have actually a Facebook page on Fantasy Football Scout. Just remembered now.
Yeah.
I don't think that did much though. I don't think for some reason it was Twitter that took off.
Facebook's so dead now, isn't it? Apart from, communicating with your loved ones, it's not really used for that much anymore, is it?
As it happens, it's used more for politics.
Really?
So so the vast amount of traffic for politics is on Facebook and not Twitter.
Really? That surprises me.
Yeah.
I know there was I know people, without going too much into politics, I know there's lots of accusations of certain people spending a certain amount of money to get certain amounts of adverts on Facebook at different times. I also just thought, again, without getting too political, when you said about what happens over the pond often comes over here, I'm hoping that's not true of a certain president.
Yeah.
But what was your favourite episode, Lee, of the Scoutcast, if you have one?
Oh gosh. I don't know. I remember I was trying to think earlier about kind of famous, because I anticipated something like this. Recalling some of the things that happened. I remember because I used to have a section on there called Granny's Myth, because I was always kind of quite wound up by and I hadn't done particularly well. I was wound up by the number of injustices that happened to me and don't happen to anybody else, particularly Mark, and how lucky he was. And that was kind of the whole there was a section about that, and I used to sit there ranting, which I think when you ask people, what was their favorite bit of the podcast, so they often say Granny's Myth, because I think they recognized it, or they certainly saw parallels with the way that they played it and the way that they got miffed about playing fantasy football and the things that happened which were out of their control, but all kind of colluded to cost them points. And so that was people identified with that mostly. And so I just remembered. Do you remember years ago the bonus points used to be done on what it's known as a man in the stand. So there were judgments made on who was the best player, and so it was kind of quite arbitrary sometimes who got the points.
And was it not open? Or was it not transparent? This is a little bit before I started playing, but I've heard about it before.
No, totally opaque. I mean, it was just we did find out a few years later that we met on I think on Scout or on Twitter, people who were the judges of the games, and the judges of the bonus points. So they used to have one man in the stand who would award 3, 2, and 1. And there is something very nostalgic about that, because it is, for me, the way I play the game is I do play the game by sight. I'm not really a big stats person. Even now, I don't look at XG and XA. I just kind of go, I want this player to do well. I'm hoping that he does well, and then and let's see what happens. But I do remember one episode when Robbie Keane had scored. I think he'd scored 2 goals for Spurs in like it's a 4-0 win, and when the bonus points came out, I think he got either 1 or non-bonus points, and I was fuming. I had him in the team. I was fuming over a couple of points because he scored 2 goals. He was by far the best player, yet he didn't get the bonus points, and I just remember like criticizing the man in the stand. What do they think they're watching? Da 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 da. Did they know that I was on Robbie Keane? Yeah, so it was that was one that I do remember, and I remember. You remember a lot of the things that went wrong rather than the things that went right. I think that's probably the same with a lot of people. I remember. Yeah, it's just the way we are as humans. Yeah. I remember Yossi Benayoun was in my team, and he hadn't done anything for weeks, and it was kind of a bit of a maverick pick really because he wasn't he wasn't scoring that many goals. I took him out of my team, and then he scored a hat trick the next game. And I was so annoyed. I was so annoyed that I did a rage wild card and brought him back in, and then he didn't score another goal. So I think after about 6 weeks or so, I got rid of him. It's just sometimes things like that affect you in and they affect your thinking. I think if I was going to give a tip to, I'm not the best person to speak to about tips and stuff, but if I was going to give a tip, I'd say don't be just take each week as it comes. Don't dwell on what happened the previous week because it can affect what you do this week. Obviously that with players in form and everything, but if somebody just gets a random hat trick, just accept it. You didn't have him, and don't go chasing points which are lost. But double game weeks were a big one because the second game would be often in midweek. I remember Carl having Clint Dempsey. He did nothing in the first game, and then the second game he scored 2 goals like late in the second half. I remember that one, and I remember making a whole podcast about talking about that because we themed the write up for the podcast would be themed around what we spoke about, and we'd so people were aware of what was coming. But, there was and then there was a lot of things around controversies around assists. One that I remember clearly was when Rooney got the ball hit his bootlace, I think, and he got an assist for it. I mean, it was just like you couldn't tell from the replays that it touched his boot at all, and they give him an assist.
I remember that one. I think, yeah.
Yeah, and the whole thing with the Lukaku assist, I don't know if you know, that's sort of like a saying now. If anything happens, you say like a Lukaku assist, because he used to get assists out of nothing. I'd just be in there joining in the celebration. So he seemed to attract a lot of assists which he didn't deserve. So all those things came up in our podcast, of course, and I think people identified with them because they were probably having their own sort of personal battles with their own rivals. And
a lot of people say because you're the first people they heard talk about it, the Scoutcast holds a special place in their heart because of that, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, we were just 2 guys like down the pub talking about football or fantasy football.
Yeah.
That's all it was. That's all it was to me. I think when it became more professionalized, that's probably when I started moving away.
So to get on to that, we talked a little bit about before we started recording about actually when you finished, but I suppose you were doing the Scoutcast on a regular basis for what would have been 6 years or something like that.
Yeah, I think it was. Regular as in like we tried to do one every week.
Yeah,
we tried to do one every week, but we didn't always make them every week for various reasons. Just people being busy.
Yeah.
Mark forgetting his the power pack for his laptop. There'll be always some kind of technical issue which meant we couldn't record it that week. I think we've got an episode that went missing as well somewhere. So if anybody ever finds that,
Like the missing Doctor Who episode was.
yeah. We did. I think once we recorded half of one and didn't finish it for there was some emergency. We once recorded one in his. I think he had a spare room in his flat because we couldn't get the studio that week. We recorded it in a spare room in his flat, and it was the soundproofing was awful. It was really echoey. We called it the dungeon episode, I think. It was it's pretty awful. So we tried to do them every week. We didn't always make them every week, and then people complain, where's the Scoutcast this week? So at that point we knew that we had a duty in a way to actually produce them, and that became started to become a little bit onerous, especially with the having to edit them. That became. It kind of started interfering in our lives a little bit, and especially I just had kids in 2010, so it was we were busy people, so it was difficult.
So the next question I was going to ask is like when did you sort of start deciding to step away, and why, and do you ever miss it as well?
Well, answer the last one. Yes, I do miss it. I do miss it, but it's not like we can ever go back there. It's not. I guess I miss the nostalgia, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't miss the kind of like staying up till 1 o'clock in the morning editing. I don't miss that. I started stepping back around the time I got involved in politics, but it wasn't really that. It was also that I saw other people who were good as well, and they were better. In many ways, they brought something new, new to the game, which I didn't particularly want to produce. And so, at that point, I think it was a point that we started, making them 3 and 4 away. That's when I started thinking, well, other people can do this as well, so maybe can take a back seat for a little, for a couple of episodes, then come back, and so I started missing them, and then became more infrequent, and so it was a gradual thing. It wasn't any firm decision that I was going to stop doing them. It's just that other things took over, and it just seemed the right time to start stepping back.
How do you think content creation's FPL content creation here has changed since you sort of like, I don't want to say hung up your boots, but left, or if you think it has,
How do I think it's changed?
Yeah, if it has, because you could argue that it's very much the same in a lot of ways.
Well, yeah, there were things that Mark started, like we had in the Scoutcast, we had things like Rotation Watch, which was, the likelihood of players, playing the next game, and we had his watch list. We had ways of actually assessing players within the within the show, where it was all kind of like Mark would just come along and draw up a table, and then we'd go through the table, and that was about as professional as it got. So that was, it just wasn't like that. But yeah, and it just started evolving, and just people started. I think when Mark created the members page and started adding content. I mean, the Opta, when we first started using Opta, that was sort of a big shift, I think. Because I do remember he used to get the Opta stats. So he went into contract with Opta, and he got the Opta stats, but they were only available through an XML. So just a file which we had to then upload to the site. So that was the content, and so he started developing all that content on the members page, and then he had other people who were working full time on it, and so I think that's where the content really, the extra content really took off, and then the use of Twitter and YouTube, once that took off, and that then became a lot more than it was. A lot more than it was. Some of the content out there is phenomenal, to say. But I don't personally spend my time watching it.
Yeah, I mean the XG thing. That's the big thing
Yeah,
this couple of years,
yeah.
isn't it?
Well, we used to have, I mean, like Optus has like things like shots in the box, missed chances, all that. So all those things they've been sort of brought into these single stats,
Single number,
which
yeah.
actually tell you quite a lot, about whether what the chances are of a player getting a goal or assist. But I don't swear by them. I do, sometimes look at them. But no, I think listen. I think it's moved in it's moved in a very different direction, and there's so many people providing content now. I've lost track.
Sorry about that for the viewers. A slight technical error on my part there. It seems to be resolved, Lee. Yeah, so we were talking about content. Any other points you had on that?
Well, I think I think it's gone in a direction which is kind of natural, really. I think people are. There's so many people playing the game now, and so many people who want to access that content. I think there's good luck to people who are making content. I think it's something different. I'm happy to be in the annals of FPL history, but I may at some point get more involved again. It just depends on my workload, because I'm still in love with the game. I still play the game. It's just that I'm not there sort of every hour of the day studying my team and fretting about my captaincy choice.
Which is probably a good thing. So I've lost my place there. I was going to ask, do you make many appearances now? I saw, I know you appeared on Joe's last appearance on the Scoutcast, didn't you? That was about 3 years ago. Have you made many other appearances?
I was on Black Box a couple of years ago.
Okay.
Az actually asked me to come on. I think it was last year. And it was a last minute kind of thing, and I couldn't make it. So if anybody wants to invite me on, I'm quite happy to. I'm quite happy to come on. But a couple of years. Yeah. So that's why I said to you, as I'm a bit nervous. I haven't done one of these for ages and ages. So what I'm going to talk about, but
comes back naturally. No, it comes back natural. No, definitely not. Just a question I didn't have written down. What did you think of Mark going to work? I'm not expecting you to give away anything because I know you're good friends of him. But do you think it's a good thing that he's gone to work for the Premier League? I mean, I'm certainly going to miss him on Black Box.
Well, so all this time, the one thing that has really annoyed me about FPL, it's probably another one of the reasons why I stepped back a little bit, is that it's not really, the game itself hasn't evolved. It's not evolved. I mean, the chips and stuff, I think I still don't like them. I certainly didn't like the assistant manager chip that they brought in this year. I think it hasn't really evolved in the way that I wanted it to. I'd always come on and kind of do Scoutcast, do a section on what I think they need to improve the game.
Did you like the more competitive pricing and the changing of the free transfers this year?
Yeah, I did actually, but then I don't think we were short of cash money this year. Again, I think it's just, it always sort of sorts itself out where cheaper players come along and they then become really important to have. I think obviously Haaland was a bit overpriced, but I think that did help a little bit, that you did have to make choices. I mean, it didn't help me because I made the wrong choice at the beginning of the season because I didn't have Haaland, and I didn't get him for weeks and weeks. And then when I got him eventually, he did, then he went on a dry period, and I did the same with Salah as well. I didn't get him. I was really stubborn. I didn't get him for weeks and weeks and weeks, and so I had Salah at the start. So I thought I had to make a choice between Salah and Haaland, and I chose Salah at the start, and then I switched. I switched to Haaland at the wrong time. So those things actually sorted it kind of put us into two streams, and it did, I think almost like the season was over for me after like 10 or so games. So yes, I did like it because it did make it. It did give you those choices, but I didn't like the choice that I made.
So these two questions, we can cut them out if if you don't want to answer. We can cut this entire bit out. I was going to ask, do you still listen to the Scoutcast? And what's your favourite lineup since you left?
I know. I can't answer that.
You can't answer the second.
But I can't answer it primarily because I don't know who's on.
Okay.
I mean, that's the honest truth. I don't. I have met some of them who, and I honestly don't follow the Scout anymore.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, I'll just say from my perspective, you guys were the original ones. I really liked FPL mode.
Yeah. And
the guys who were doing it before this one. I'm trying to remember their names now. Guy with a beard. Bloody hell, I should have written their names down.
I don't know. Honestly, I'm out of touch really with Scout. Sadly, in a way, but I'm out of touch really with content as a whole. So I don't really follow much content. I sometimes when I'm on Twitter to see Andy's done a feed, I'll listen to that. But really, I'm not one to watch content. Sorry.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Last question. I'll try and remember the name of the two people as we go along. Last question in this section was, how did you come up with the name Granville? Because obviously your real name's Lee.
So it was it comes from my background. My mother's Hungarian, and in the 80s there was a sitcom called Open All Hours, and David Jason character in there was called Granville, and he was half Hungarian. So that's where it comes from. And so I started off using the handle Granville when I was playing computer games. When I was playing Counter-Strike, I think. Half-Life, I can't remember, one of those multiplayer games, and then it just stuck. And so I used that name quite a long time before I started with fantasy football. But I still go by that name, and it's quite interesting because people know me by my name, by my nickname, and people still call me that. And then people call me a shortened version of Granville, Granny. Difficult situations where people who don't know anything about me or fantasy football or anything, why is your Twitter handle FF Scout Granny? It's quite dodgy when you think about it. And I have been asked that question a couple of times, but no, and so it's really weird when people call me Granville in front of my family, and they didn't actually understand, where that came from. So is it even at my workplace? So even because I got a new workplace now, and I when we play, because we play like multiplayer games, and I go on as Granville, and I feel that I have to now explain what that is, and it's a little bit embarrassing. Although I mean, I'm not bad, because Open All Hours is probably still my favorite 1980s comedy. But yeah, it's. Do you find that when you talk to people about fantasy football who have no interest in it, like your parents, for instance, do they look at you kind of funny? I mean, I've always been slightly embarrassed about talking about fantasy football, which is football, but just a made up. That it's really difficult to explain to people.
Yeah.
Do this the other day to this lady I work with. Because I was talking about the podcast that we used to do, and she had no clue, no idea what fantasy football was, and I had to explain that first. And I felt like a little, I don't know, I didn't feel comfortable explaining it, because I don't know, it's just difficult, with certain people.
My mum can't understand it. She understands computer games, so she understands what Football Manager is, and she understands what football is, but I can't get over to her what fantasy football is. It's a game, but it's based on real, you know what I mean?
It's based on real players.
Yeah.
But you don't. You pick. And this is how I was trying to explain it. You pick a number of players from all, from the Premier League, and there's certain rules around who you can pick, and you've got a certain amount of money that you can spend, and then all of a sudden you they're looking at you with glazed eyes. Where am I going to go with this one now? And then saying, well, we used to do a podcast about it. We used to get 20,000 people listen to it every week. Really? Yeah, it's really difficult to explain to a layperson that this is something that people take seriously.
Yeah, very seriously. Okay. Oh yes, Seb and Flapjack. Those were the two.
Oh, Seb, yeah.
Yeah, those
Seb.
were the two.
I'm pretty sure that I've done a podcast with Seb. I've definitely done one with Flapjack. Yeah, so that was one of the last ones that I did on Scout.
Yeah, he did. Those two in FPL mode were consistently on for about 2 years, so I think they really had the time to build up the sort of rapport and stuff. But unfortunately, both of those, Seb and Flapjack, have now taken the season out. I mean, the lads that have come in are fine, but I think those three were probably my favourite since you lads. All right, so we'll move on a little bit and to the second stage interview, which is about FPL and mental health. Just a reminder, if you're still listening to the pod at this point, please do like to help get more people to see the video, and please subscribe to help me get up to 1,000 subscribers. So the question I usually start this one with, Granville, is: has FPL ever had an effect on your mental health, mood, as a player and or as a content creator when you were doing it back in the day?
Yeah, very much so. And yeah, I think we do kind of take it quite seriously sometimes. On Saturday when the games are being played and you're there on your phone, just checking out the scores. I'd be countless times that I've been in the middle of town, middle of Brighton, somewhere where everybody's going about their business, and I'm checking my phone, and then I'm going, for fuck's sake, or I'm allowed to swear on this.
Yeah.
But even worse when I've got the family with, and I have shamefully at times taken it out on them. I think that's it's an awful thing to admit, and I wouldn't I wouldn't. At times, I have reacted very, very strangely, and sort of felt a bit of shame. So yes, you get angry and everything, and you can dwell on things for a long time. You can dwell on things. I mean, it fortunately with fantasy football is that you can amend things the next week.
Yeah.
And so it's not, you do have a short amount of time.
In that,
do that. The worst thing is that when it happens to you, before an international break.
Yeah, in that moment, though, it can destroy you.
It can. It can, and I can definitely see people who struggle already with anxiety would struggle. If they're taking it seriously, would struggle with a game like this, because ultimately, I mean, things are so out of your control, right? There are things within your control which you can kick yourself about, but there's so much that's out of your control, and you can blame this and this and this, all these events just happening, but there's nothing you can really do about it, other than just give you I think fantasy football is just about increasing your chances of scoring points, by selecting the correct players at the right time. What happens in those games is out of your control. But we do tend to, especially when there's rivalries, it can definitely affect your mood. I know that one of the content creators, I can't remember who it was. He used to be involved in Scout, did write a book about fantasy football, one of the earlier ones, and he did write a section on mental health. But I know that you've been involved, haven't you, in studying?
Yeah, I do some research with Raptor and some people. Yeah.
Yeah, so it is. I think we've all experienced downs. We've also experienced highs as well. But it is. It does. Yeah, it does. It does affect me, and it is probably one of the reasons why I don't take it quite as seriously now. So I've kind of I pulled myself out of it, but I don't, because I'm not quite as competitive now. If something goes wrong, then it goes wrong, and I can get over it very, very quickly.
Has it?
But in the days when, especially when you're on the scout cast and you have the pressure
Yeah.
of being involved in creating content, and people are looking to you, as somebody who knows what they're talking about, and then if it doesn't go right one week, then you feel that you've let you let a load of other people down as well as yourself. You let those people down as well, and so that does dwell on you as well. So I can see, if you're a content creator, there's quite a lot of pressure on you to get things right, because as soon as something goes wrong, there'll be some idiot on Twitter
Get a lot of stick,
having a go at you for not making their own decisions.
Yeah. So I was going to ask that. So do you think it's partly gone down because you're no longer making content and no longer in the, I don't know if you're still in a rivalry with Mark, but certainly not such an intense rivalry with Mark?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, my rankings have also gone to shit as well. But that, I mean, I actually, you when you say that I spent all this time playing, like studying everything, and then I might as well not spent that time studying the game, because I still scored I would have scored as well had I not spent any time in it. Well, that's not true, and I know that's not true, because the last few years where I've taken less of an interest in it, my rankings have dropped. It's it seems obvious, but you do have those moments when you think nothing's going right, and I spent all this time studying the form, studying players, and I might as well have just kind of just guessed. I might as well just randomly pick some players.
My opinion, I think there's a cut-off point where, obviously, like you say, if you put no effort in, it's going to show. But I think there's also a point where you can put too much effort in that it starts to cloud your judgment. You know what I mean? It's a difficult balance to.
Yeah, you need to find that level. I've tried for years to find that level, and never have.
So this question you wouldn't have seen watching them back, because this is a new one. What given weekend, Man United are playing. What's most important to you? Man United winning, or you have a good FPL game week? You have a green arrow.
Oh God. Right. The right thing to say is that I support my football team, and that's the most important thing, right?
That's what most people say.
And that essentially is correct. But there are times when, like this season, for instance, I've just seen United lose so many games, and it doesn't matter if they lose another one. and it's not bothered me, when they've they conceded a goal, because I haven't got any of their defenders.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't really have that many United players in my team, and I haven't for quite a long time, because none worth having. But no, I think, generally, when United are competing, the most important thing is for my team to win. It doesn't matter who they're playing. I think you do tend, as a fan, to sort of look at players from your own team. I think there is a bit of loyalty there. I want to put United players in my team. It's just I can't justify putting them in the team, because that'd be the best of both worlds. You win and you score points. But no, I think as a football fan first, I support United. But if it was really, really important, if it was like going into the final week and I'm level pegging with Mark, and United are playing City, and the league's on the league's on that, I think I would always support my team. I think I would, but there are situations. I know there have been situations where it hasn't bothered me at all when United have someone scored against United and I've had their player in my team.
Sounds quite close then.
It has been. It's been. Yeah. It's not something that I. I think it's only because it doesn't really matter very much if United lose games.
Yeah, no.
At this minute, it really doesn't. But when, it's a different matter when they're competing for titles. Maybe that'll happen again one day.
Does sort of related question? Does FPL? How do I put this? How does FPL ever the team you support ever affect your FPL decisions? So, for example, you put Man United players in because it's Man United, or you don't captain Salah because he's playing United and you don't want him to do well, that sort of thing.
Definitely in the few years, definitely I had made the decisions according to who United were playing. I would never like to captain, and I don't think it's the same now because I know that I captained Salah a few times against United recently. I never wanted to captain a player against United. I mean, it's just it sort of goes against my instincts. That's when you had there were times when you actually had a choice of a captain. You had 3 or 4 choices, and then you wouldn't feel one was better or worse than the other. Whether it be Lampard or Gerrard or Ronaldo, they'd all be quite similar. They'd all score quite similar, or they'd all have chances of scoring. These days, it's like if it's not Haaland or Salah, then you're taking a big risk. So when they go into games against United, I don't think twice about it.
It's strange, isn't it? Because it was that way, and he's been absolutely useless for about 10 weeks, isn't he?
Oh no, I know. He has been useless. I think he's just taken. Well, I think he's gone back to normal. That's what it is. He was just insane for weeks. I don't know if he's going to get the highest points of any player in the FPL season.
He's already beaten it. He beat it a few weeks ago, I think.
Oh my God, it was incredible.
It was like
what was that Haaland's record from last year?
No, I don't think it was. I don't think Haaland actually broke the record. He had the record number of goals, but I think they're both. I think he was in the top 5. Someone did post about it on Twitter, but I know Salah definitely broke the record a couple of weeks ago for FPL points.
It's more likely to be a midfielder, isn't it? Because he'll score more points.
Probably. It might have even been Salah himself.
Yeah.
Or Ronaldo, or someone like that.
If I was really, really involved, I'd know. I'd have that at the tip of my tongue. I'd know all these stats. Everyone's making content. I'd know these stats, of course.
So, final question of this section, Lee. What advice would you give to anyone who's struggling with their mood or mental health or whatever as a result of FPL this season, or this season will be over by the time this comes out, in general?
Gosh, someone who's struggling, what with the way the FPL's affecting their mood.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like in the situation you described earlier.
God, that's so difficult because I know how involved you can get and how how it can affect you. I mean, I would say something simple like just put your phone away. I think just get anything to distract you. Yeah, go and phone your mum, or if you've got other family, have a chat with them. Just think about other things. There's more important things in life than fancy football. There's more important things in life than football. Although Shanky didn't think that. There is, there has to be a point at which you don't get. I think you have to learn. You have to teach yourself not to get too affected by it. It took me many years of being in foul moods. I just don't get that right now, but that's because I have different interests.
Yeah.
So put down your phone, talk to a loved one, read. Just get your if it's football, get yourself away from football completely, because that's not I know it's fancy football, but that's not going to help neither. Dwelling on something that's happened last week.
Okay, so we'll go into the last section of the interview now, where we just have a chat about things in general, FPL wise. So the season's going to be finished at this stage. It's game week 39, so people are probably going to be evaluating how their season is going. How's yours going, Granville?
I think my season finished after 10 weeks because
Really?
I didn't have Haaland.
Yeah, you alluded to
Um,
that.
oh gosh, yeah, I didn't have Haaland, and then I didn't get Salah at the right time. Yeah, it's just been a complete car crash. It just I'm actually 3 millionth, so probably everybody that's listening to this show is ahead of me. That's how bad it's been. So I think I'm just looking at my previous scores. It's going to be by far and away my worst ever. In fact, I've never finished um, outside the top outside the top 600,000. So yeah, disaster.
Any particular
And
reason?
even in some of my leagues where I'd expect just to win, just to walk it, people who just don't know what they're doing, I'm like halfway down the league.
Are you still in the
Um,
league with Mark?
yeah, we are still in a couple of leagues. We're still in so there's a league which is called FF Scout Mods and Cons,
Right.
and it includes people who have worked for the Scout over the years. I don't think people really leave the. I think Andy did leave it for some reason. People basically don't leave it, so it's basically an alumni of Scout moderators and contributors. And Mark's in there. I think I'm in some work leagues with him as well, some sort of legacy work leagues as well. But Mark's not doing. I mean, he's doing all right. I think. How's he doing? 78,000. So he's doing pretty well. But yeah, I've been bottom of the Scouts and Cons League. I've been bottom most of the season, but I've actually lifted myself up to second from bottom, probably third. So I've had a bit of
I won't ask who's below
the
you.
last few weeks. I mean, I had Consa this week, so that's helped. So there's games on now, isn't there?
There is. There is.
Yeah, Palace and Wolves and City.
Yeah, it was almost because we weren't on. I thought maybe someone basically asked me to go on a watch along tonight, but I was like, I can't. I've got Granville coming on. But yeah, it's quite a
Right.
big. It's quite a big night tonight. I think it will probably define people's seasons a lot. So here's a couple
Yeah,
of questions I ask here. What do you think nowadays should be considered a good rank for a player? Because obviously back in the day, particularly when you guys started, it was always top 10k. Do you still think
yeah.
that, or widen it out?
I don't think it can be top 10k anymore. I
No.
mean, I think if you finish top 10k, it's amazing. Um, and even in the Scout League, where you got people who really know what they're doing, there's only a couple of them that are in the top 10k. I think well, I think if it was top 10k and there was like 2 million players playing, and now there's 10 million, then it's got to be top 50k. But I think it's actually even more difficult than that because the resources out there are just far superior than when we were playing seriously, or when I was playing seriously rather. It's it's a lot more difficult now because there's just so much more info there, and things like XA and XG. If you just follow those, you probably just get a good rank. So it just makes it much more competitive. So I think there's 5 times as many players, then there's probably 100 times more information out there. It just makes it very difficult to
Then
get.
you got sites like Review and Scout and the Rate My
Yeah,
Team stuff.
yeah, and it's all good stuff. But it's just created a level playing field, more of a level playing field for people, and because you can just follow your favorite content creator and get yourself a good rank normally. So yeah, I don't know. I would, if I finished in the top 100,000, I'd be very very content. I think maybe that should be the new target.
That's my battle. People will know by the time I've only started live streaming, doing like actual FPL, normal FPL content the last 10 weeks, and I'm 5 points off the top 100k. So it's my aim. Well, I guess tonight will have a big effect because I've got 5 players playing or 4 players playing.
Yeah.
People will probably know by the time this comes out if I finish there. Do you think this is a bit of a weird one? Do you think it should be rank history should be important in terms of the people we watch for FPL content? If you get what I mean. Because obviously
that's a difficult one.
Mark had the
It depends
incredible.
what you. Yeah, no, it depends what you're looking for. If you want entertainment, you want information with somebody who's articulate and funny, and just keeps your interest. Then sometimes that can be just as important, I think.
Yeah.
And they may not have particularly good rank, but sometimes ranks come and go. Somebody could be having if somebody had a great season last season and a bad one this, you just all of a sudden turn them off because they're not giving you the right info. There's too many factors at play, I think, in FPL, and even more now because, as I say, it's harder to get really, really good ranks. So I personally would look for somebody that retains my interest personally, rather than the ranks. I mean, ranks obviously got some. If somebody's giving you information and you're paying for it, then yeah, you want to ensure that they know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
But people can say, people can talk a good game, but then when it comes to it, they're just really, really unlucky.
Mm.
Well,
particularly in the one-off season.
Yeah, in a one-off season. I mean, you look at some people's ranks over the years. Just do a standard deviation or something. Just pick out, on a bell curve, and just look at do some sort of analysis and see how they're done. If somebody's like, because there's people who have won FPL and then the next year they've been outside the top 1 million.
Yeah, quite often happens, doesn't it?
Yeah, so it's it's difficult. If all the stars align, then you're going to be like in the top 10,000. That's the way I look at it. I mean, you earn it by spending time spending time in the game. Definitely, you can earn your rank, but there's lots and lots of other factors at play.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So we kind of touched on it earlier. I've been asking everyone this for the last, since the chip came out. You alluded to your opinions earlier that you weren't a fan of the assistant manager chip. What I'll ask you is, do you think they should keep it going forward? And if they do, would you change anything about it?
I think the concept of having a manager scoring points is a good one.
Really? A lot of people don't like that.
Yeah, I think it is. And then I think actually, I've always, when I've spoken about improvements I want to see to FPL, I want to see the result reflected in bonus points as well. So I don't want to see a player get bonus points because he scored a consolation goal. I think it's a load of nonsense, because it didn't affect the game at all. So I think, definitely managers. But the concept of managers scoring points is good. But the way that they implemented it is just, I'm astounded, because I've always wanted this game to be a bit more complicated than it is. Just introduce things like attacking midfielders, half points off the bench. There's a load of things that I've kind of thrown into the mix that I wanted to see improve. But never in my wildest dreams did I think they would introduce something so convoluted. How does anybody? I mean, FPL have always said to us that we want to make the game as simple as possible to attract players. And that's why they introduced the other chips, because all those other chips are really to keep people interested towards the end of the season, for the more casual player. That's why they were introduced. And it's had all the knock-on effects, which I don't particularly like. But with this one, this assistant manager one, I mean, you can obviously score good points, and people who had Glasner in that game week did really, really well.
I did, yeah.
And that was a good choice. Did you have him?
I did. I went slot Glasner, so I did all right with it. But so many people.
I avoided slot. I avoided that, and I went the next game week, and I went for Emery, and so I didn't do. I did okay. I didn't do particularly well. I didn't have Moyes, so those were the ones to have.
And the people that triple capped in that game week ended up doing pretty well as well. You know what I mean?
I had the triple cap Salah, I think. Yeah, so I had triple captain then and did pretty well. So it matched the sort of the high scores of the assistant manager. But how do people, people who are kind of, first year players or noobs, how do they get their head around something like that? Because I'm in actually another league, which only started a couple of years ago, where I speak to people on WhatsApp, and they're all people from my area, people in the local political party, etc. People who I know, and they've only just started playing, and they were asking me, well, just asking what's all this assistant manager thing about, and it's really difficult to explain because I didn't know until like a few weeks before I played it actually how it worked myself.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't be bothered. I couldn't be bothered looking at it until I knew that I wanted to. I knew I would play it towards the end of the season, when there were double game weeks. But I didn't know. I didn't know the best way to use it. I think I worked it out at the end. But no, I think they will have us. They will look at that and think, well, how can we make this better? Well, no, I know that's what they're going to do.
Not giving anything away there.
No. I know there are going to be changes. I've always wanted the game to evolve with the game of football. So football's involved in that you have like false nines and midfielders who are kind of inverted wingers, all that kind of it's all changed over the years. So you don't really have 4-4-2s anymore, and there are very few forwards available in FPL, and that should have been sorted out years ago.
Yeah,
because it's become more and more problematic.
Do you think they should put wingers like Salah and that as forwards?
Yeah,
I
absolutely. And they have done in all the other fancy games. That's what they did. Like Sky Game, yeah, definitely, because they're forwards. They should be classed as forwards. I don't think it's and I think it would improve the game a little bit. I think when you've got more players to pick from at that position, more players who can score well, because otherwise, just it. To be fair, this year's been quite different because there's been players like Cunha who have kind of done really well, like cheaper forwards. But if Salah was a forward, then I don't think you definitely wouldn't have Salah. You couldn't have. Well, you'd only have 3 slots, wouldn't you? So it's Salah, Haaland, one other. Then you're struggling in midfield to afford Saka. So I'm. What was your original question? It was about assistant manager, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, just we were saying that, I've just realised I've got Mark Southern's phone number. Maybe I can just text him whenever I have a new idea for FPL. I'll just drop him a quick line, and.
But it was dumb because I didn't even, I wouldn't even insult him to ask him anything like that because I know what ND. No, I know you won't, but I know what I know what NDAs are, and
but the question was,
I think that the game itself hasn't evolved as well as it should have, and that's the only thing that they changed that I really liked was many years ago when they introduced the vice captaincy.
Was that not a thing? There's been a thing since I started playing.
Before your time.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. So the vice captaincy only came in, like 6 or 7 years into us playing, like in like 2012 or something. Maybe it was a bit earlier, but it was something that we asked for on the scout, and they ended up.
Mark told me they came to you guys for a lot of what should we do with this game sort of thing.
Yeah. So we met up with them. We were invited. We used to go to games with them.
Oh, cool.
And we were talking about how the game can evolve, but I think they were always very cautious. It's not because it's not FPL who develop it; it's a company, ISM. They're quite cautious, which I understand, and they've done really well. They've attracted so many players to the game. That's what it, and then you have to understand that. Well, I understand that the new players are attracted by the simplicity of it.
Yeah,
if you add things in like attacking midfielders, which is one that's been spoken about many times. It's just going to another position. It's going to detract from the game. From the simplicity of the game.
Yeah, a lot of people talk about like making it like Sky and adding in the defensive numbers and key passes and all that. But I think I wouldn't like that because again, it just overcomplicates things. I think.
Yeah, I think they tried to do it via the bonus point system, but it hasn't quite. There's too much noise in the bonus point system for you to be rewarded for anything other than assists and goals. I still don't think that they've got that. They have improved it though. Last year they definitely improved it, but it's difficult to rate players, on stats only, and to penalise players, for hitting the post. I don't agree with that. I think that I know it's nostalgia or anything, but I did like the man in the stand giving out his own bonus points. Yet at the time, I really criticised them when they gave out those points. So I think they can't win with me.
I think they got rid of the minus points for shots off target. I think they did, but I mean, I'm not going to proclaim to be a bonus points expert. So, Granville, last question I usually ask: with an amazing FPL player here, 3 million in the world, what general tips would you give to someone wanting to improve their FPL game in the 25-26 season?
Don't listen to Granville. That's it.
Well, they can't listen to you anyway. You're not on anywhere.
I know, but that's why they're not calling for me to come back. Although they are. When I posted that photo of myself and Mark at the weekend, got some nice comments.
Yeah, it got quite a few likes, didn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know. I want to see though what changes are coming. But I'm like this every year.
Awesome. Okay, so thanks so much for coming on, Granville. It has been an absolute pleasure, mate.
Yeah.
This will, for anyone still listening to this, this will be the last interview of the season. The interview series will be back next season in a slightly attenuated form. They're probably not going to come out every week, but when I get someone I really want to get on for an interview, they'll be coming on. I won't mention any names at this stage, but there's some very exciting people hopefully going to come on during pre-season. Please like to help get the video out there. Please subscribe to help me get up to 1,000 subscribers by the start of next season. Granville, anything you want to say before we finish, mate?
Thanks for inviting me, Harry. It's been a while since I've done this kind of thing on live, recorded interviews, and I hope that people listen in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't be too hard on me though.
In the comments. Maybe I'll try and get you on for a live stream next season, Granville, if you're up for it.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. I'd be happy to do anything related to content if people want to bring me on for the lols.
Thank you so much for watching, everyone, and I will see you for this interview series at least next season.